Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Rio Miner. Welcome to Tradecraft. This is my educational series powered by my employer, Refined Intelligence, in which we discuss practical solutions and cutting-edge technologies related to the anti-financial crime, anti-money laundering space. So today we'll be discussing how to unlock efficiency by harnessing the power of generative AI, which is this new technology we've all seen explode in consumer tools recently. And we'll discuss how you, as an anti-money laundering or anti-financial crime professional, might be able to harness this technology for good and for efficiency, for effectiveness. So this is a little discussion of our agenda. You can see here, I've put a bunch of creative images on these slides. I did use AI to generate most of these. We'll be talking about what AI is, maybe what it's not. We'll discuss a little bit of this new tool, this generative tool that's been released, and maybe how we can use it for AML departments, maybe not. There's a lot of pitfalls and cautions. As with any emerging technology, it's important that we test it. It's important that you not only look at what other folks are using it for and saying, but that you understand its limitations and how it works to begin with, which is why we're doing a webinar like this. And then lastly, we are going to get a little risky, and we will do some live studies. I'm going to pop up a couple of the most common generative AI text tools, and we'll attempt to make some AML sense out of the whole thing. Couple of admin notes for today. If you'd like to ask questions, I really welcome questions. I know there's bigger brains on the line than mine. So if you have a question that might stump me, if you have a basic question that you are like, wait a minute, you didn't cover X, I love to help you get out of the parking lot. I love to theorize with folks. So please do throw that in the Q&A chat, and I'll address those as we get closer to the end. If you have something really relevant, then my moderator, Rebecca, will definitely bring my attention to it if I need to explain a term or something that I missed. That's my deal with you. I like to answer questions. I like this to be a little collaborative, so let me know what you think. Okay, by way of introduction, my name is Rio Miner. If you haven't seen my training before, I love doing this. I have been in financial crime for a while, currently working with Refined Intelligence. I worked at banks before that for, 13, 14 years. I was with a really big bank on the West Coast. I did investigations. I did training programs. I developed monitoring and risk assessments and things like that. And so before that, I was an Army officer. What you see on the screen, a couple of those are real images, a couple of those are AI images. It's like the old meme. Top left, who my mom thinks I am. On the right, who my VA thinks I am. Bottom left, who I think I am. Bottom right, probably where a bunch of my heart is still at, being silly off in the millie. So Refined Intelligence, what are we doing? Catching the good guys. We are dramatically increasing the efficacy and efficiency of AML teams. If you're interested to hear what that's all about, get with me later. We're not talking about that today. Today, we are going to take you from Talos to Turin. We're going to discuss a little bit of what this brand new technology, this artificial intelligence that's finally coming to be, what it is, what it's not, and how we can maybe use it. Now, I'm a big believer in machines and intelligence and computers and things making human workers more powerful, and us being able to use those things as tools. I would prefer to think of it as our tools rather than, some sort of Skynet emerging from our worst nightmares. So let's talk history, right? 3,000 years ago, millennia ago, humans had already come up with this idea. Okay, on the top left, an AI generated image. You can see the tagline there. I had to flip it because I like the way it looks better. So that's Hephaestus, the Greek god, and he's forming this bronze robot Talos that was going to stand in the harbor, and it was going to be smart enough to discriminate and be able to hurl stones at enemy ships, and apparently, hopefully not, at friendly ships. A little bit of AI from the millennia below and before. And then there's Alan Turing on the bottom right, using a nice laptop computer, and he is one of the folks that we consider the father of modern Western cryptography. And he's also someone who wrote a book around artificial intelligence, theorized what it might be, and then suggested a test for how we could tell whether a machine was actually engaged in replicating human intelligence in an artificial way. So Hopefully you all, it looks like we've had a bunch more folks join. Thank you so much. Feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box. I welcome those, just like I somewhat welcome our robot overlords, and I'll be answering those at the end. So what is AI? Again, if you're an expert in this field, I appreciate it. Play a game of solitaire real quick. We'll get through to some of the more deeper stuff and the theorizing and the discussions. But for those of us, I like to do this thing called getting out of the parking lot. People will tell me, hey, you need to turn on Main Street. And I'll be like, great, which one's that? Let's get out of the parking lot by discussing what this is and what it isn't. So our use of machines, again, the idea goes back centuries, tool making and human ingenuity to try to get these objects to do things for us is ongoing forever. And one of the biggest things in the modern world is robotic process automation. It's RPA, and it's something that we sometimes mistake for AI, but it's simple. It's more like what you can imagine thinking about an assembly line, maybe at an auto plant, and we've replaced, a human with a rivet gun with a robot arm that has a rivet gun, and it sits there all day long and robotically does a process over and over and over, and it tends to do it very well. Robots, it turns out, are very good at doing the same thing over and over and over tirelessly, as long as they're well maintained, well programmed, and well calibrated. So robotic process automation may have already helped you in a job somewhere. Then there's machine learning. So this takes that artificial usage of human tasks a little bit more into the neural realm, and software, and it tends to involve a bunch of complicated math and statistical probability measuring, which allows a machine to bring in a bunch of inputs, plot those as data points, and then use statistical techniques such as regression, linear regression, logistic regression, to create sort of a trend line out of the data, and then be able to predict what other outputs would happen if these inputs had come in slightly differently. So essentially, with many, many data points in a population, a machine can draw very accurate predictive trend lines and then continue to populate that database and learn over and over. All right, that's machine learning. On the left, I got a little cheeky with the AI. There is a machine learning at school on a nice computer there again. And again, you've got Alan Turing. We'll talk about his test. He's being tested by the machine instead of him. Anyway, there's a lot of irony in these photos. See if you can figure it out. Drop a comment if you ever get a haha out of my silly dad jokes. So machine learning, supervised versus unsupervised. Unsupervised is where you have unlabeled data sets. Supervised tends to be writ large. Supervised machine learning involves labeled data sets. And so what you have then is the ability to just look at what the data is and sort of draw these data points together and predict what it might be in the future with slightly different inputs. So true AI, it's something that I like to say a lot. We haven't really gotten there. Okay, a lot of people are running around calling their products AI, and what it is very fancy, very good machine learning. Even some of the neural networks that created this generative tool is something that we're going to explore, but it may not truly be like end of the road AI. And the reason I say that is because Alan Turing's original book posited this test, this idea that if a human interacts with a machine and can't tell that it's a machine, then that is true artificial intelligence. His idea was that the machine could be able to perfectly replicate a human mind, human activity, maybe even things like human empathy. If you remember, that was the test in Blade Runner to see whether it was a machine or not. And Turing said, well, that's the test. Okay, people in this field disagree. That's why the human versus ideal is written there at the bottom. So what we're discussing there is the idea that maybe what's better than mimicking a human is actually mimicking perfection. And I'll say it, I'm not perfect. Most humans acknowledge that we're not perfect, okay? The nuances, the gritty, unspoken things, right? Those are things that we love about humanity. That's why I'll never be for robo-umps in baseball, because I like human error as a part of the game. And I like that in life as well. But maybe that's not the goal when we're replicating human-like activities within a machine. Maybe we actually want it to be right and not like have a fun opinion that gets us emotionally. I don't know. That's a debate that is going to continue to rage long beyond me. So Now let's get into what is new then. If we've had these things forever, right? If we already automated auto assembly lines, and if we already have, predictive modeling for AML, transactions and things like that, what's new? What is it that we've been able to create out of this world? And create is the key word. The word generative means generate or to create, right? To make something new. And typically in all of the past applications, what we've seen is that they're not making anything new. They're just repeating old things or analyzing what might happen and things like that. Generative AI is making new things out of these large databases that have been created. We're going to get into the AML applications as we go down the line. I'm going to use just some of the common tools here to show you. We'll look at both Bard and ChatGPT. We're not going to look at image generation. You're looking at the results of my image generations, okay? I wanted robots writing things. I wanted robots making other robots. I wanted robots building things, building a wood shop, things like that. So I was trying to generate images of robots generating things, robots building other robots. Fun with image generation. I highly recommend playing with some of these image generation tools. They're a lot of fun. I go down rabbit holes, as you can see. So, but what is a generative AI? Let's get back to that. Neural networks are computer systems that are sort of designed to mimic the way a biological brain or a human brain works. Now, the way a human brain works is you've got these complicated cells called neurons, and they're sort of interconnected by these webs of electrical current carrying connections, synapses, okay? And those and these computer systems are designed to do the same thing, essentially. You have a bunch of these super intelligent nodes that are then able to connect and share information between each other. It's kind of like a hyper-focused, interconnected, like an internet or maybe an intranet designed to be solving these AI problems. So what that allows the machine learning tools to do is to do a version of this, which is called deep learning. And it means that they can process and reprocess astronomical amounts of data in order to be able to actually show you something new and create something out of that based on predicting what the next word or what the image would have looked like. And that's how these things work. So large language models is what we're going to focus on. Bard and ChatGPT are two primary competing top-of-the-line versions of this. There are, of course, many others, some of which I'm familiar with, some not. But hey, the way it works is a large language model ingests massive amounts of human writings. So whether it's blog posts or we've done all kinds of books that we've digitized, government websites, company websites, personal websites, MySpace, the Shade Room comment section. All of these massive troves of words have been ingested by these deep learning neural networks. And what they are then able to do is when you give the machine a prompt or ask it a question or tell it to make something for you, kind of like a 3D printer, the large language model goes out there and says, well, on this subject, let me predict what a good sentence would look like. So I want to focus you in on what we're doing and what we're not doing. What it's doing is predicting what a good sentence would look like based on the prompt, predicting what the next word should be based on looking at the way sentences are constructed. What it's not doing is validating whether the entire sentence is correct or true or accurate or represents any version of reality you've ever heard of, okay? It's making things up to look good based on the prompt. So let's be very clear about those two things. Before I get into more pitfalls and cautions, zero shot versus few shot learning, this is just kind of acclimating you to some more of this terminology on how to use these tools. So when you enter a prompt, you can kind of do it a couple of different ways. One way that some folks prefer is to write out a bunch of very detailed instructions. So you give it all the information up front and then you're done. And you say, I want you to execute these tasks in order, and you give it a bunch of language on what you want it to do. And then that is supposed to tell it what to create, and it creates it. And if you do a good job, it can be very effective. However, again, understanding how the machine works, the way it takes, the way you say things, the way it doesn't listen to you and doesn't follow some instructions, a lot of times you may have to do a little more few shot learning, which means after you get the first answer, you'll say, yeah, but please now do this to it. Like I told you to make it short, this is 10 paragraphs. Please now condense it to a 1-paragraph summary. Things like that are how few shot learning works. Okay, so pitfalls and cautions. Again, what I'm going to show you is how to use some of these tools, the current existing tools, to work on your own goals in your job. And the fact is that all these tools can be used for a lot of different things, as long as you understand what it's not going to do for you. So the first thing is I've been mentioning prompts, and it's important that you make your prompt very specific. I'll show you some ways to do that, and then optimize that prompt by trying it a couple of times and seeing what comes up with really good answers. Next, as risk managers, we tend to be hyper concerned about things like data security. We don't want PII getting out there in the world, things like that. So it's vital that you understand how secure or not secure it is. Bottom line is you're going to have to follow your company and your institution's policies and procedures on this. You're never going to go say, well, Rio said we could use ChatGPT, it's secure, and then just do it. Okay. You're going to have to go through your own wickets, right? But once you realize that it is secure, it can be a powerful tool. So the deal is this: they operate in the cloud. Okay. And if your company uses a cloud instance, then within that corporate cloud instance, you can have an instance of a tool like ChatGPT, Bard, et cetera. And that is just as secure as everything else you're doing in the cloud. It's not taking it anywhere outside of that data container that you've already created. I'm not a cybersecurity expert. That's what my cybersecurity experts tell me. Okay. Next line on the slide: hallucination and BS. Okay. What do I mean by that? Yes, I mean what you think by that. Okay. Baloney. Look, the AI does a great job of telling you what the next word should be, of writing a nice sentence, of showing you how to produce flowery language. If you tell it to make it sound more like it's from California, it'll throw dude and like in there 50 times if you want it to, okay? And then it will have you hallucinate that what it's told you is true and correct, because it does such a good job of creating this thing, okay? But sometimes what it creates is a mirage of what it really is. And what I mean by that is, like, sometimes I've had it just come up with things that weren't anywhere in my prompt, that it just came up with new ideas based on what it thought it should do. And so it caused me to hallucinate that that was something I thought was a good idea. And then it just also comes up with complete baloney, things that just don't exist, things that are straight up not true, things that don't make any sense. So it's absolutely critical, like any tool, that you understand how it works and what it can and can't do before you even step into the room with it, okay? It's kind of like, and I use this analogy all the time, some of our automated tools are designed to take a person using a shovel to dig a ditch and empower them by giving them like a backhoe or an excavator or whatever you call it, okay? And the deal is that's an amazing tool in the right hands. But if you just walk around, drive around in your backhoe, just digging stuff up, you're going to tear up utility cables and stuff like that. And you can't do that. So make sure you understand what you are and aren't able to get out of this machine. And now for the fun part. This is what you've all been waiting for. How are we going to use this in our AML world? Well, again, I want to caution you that there is a lot out there. Okay, it's important that you understand the limitations and go ahead and test this out in your personal world, just with like notional data first. And that's what I'm going to show you today. By notional, I mean, pretend data, right? So I've found that as we go from top to bottom here, these are a few things that AML professionals might be able to use it for. First of all, narratives and notes, and I'll lump in summaries in this part of the talk. So the first thing is, wow, it is actually pretty good at coming up with some basic copy and paste language for a basic part of a narrative. If I throw a few details like, this is a person whose name is this, and things happen from this date to this date and whatever, it will actually structure that into a paragraph for me. It'll do the same thing with notes, where I can just kind of write in there, some gobbledygook of what I found, and then ask it to make it look nicer for me, right? And it does the same thing with the summary. I can kind of take notes throughout the day, or I can even better. You ever get one of those really, really long email chains where you've gone back and forth with somebody about a certain issue, right? And you're like, man, I wish I could just summarize this entire conversation. You can copy and paste that into a ChatGPT instance or a Bard instance, and it'll summarize it for you. It'll say, oh, what this was about was an email conversation between Joe and Rita, and they talked about this, and then they talked about this, and they came to this decision. It's pretty good at that, okay? Those are summary usages. And sometimes for those of you that are not as strong of writers, I recommend a great way to do this is to do it, but then read it very carefully, okay? If you're, again, not good with writing, one technique is to read it out loud and see if it makes sense and see if the things that it's saying are factual or if they're kind of off the rails, okay? Now for interpretation, this is one where, you know, I give the AI like a C grade, where sometimes it comes up with the right thing and other times I need to do multi-shot, few shot learning with it. And then other times it just gets it wrong. Same with explanations and same with going out and finding info, because again, it can't discriminate between like what is true and what is not true. So it might go look at a parody page, right? Something that's designed for satire and think it's true. That's like one of those funny news stories where, you know, some foreign state-run news agency picks up like an Onion headline or a Babylon Bee headline, right? And thinks it's the truth when these are clearly satirical publications. So remember that AI can't tell the difference. Its large language model is populated on the broad spectrum of human interactions and commentary on the internet, much of which is sensationalized or, you know, people discuss things in theory, et cetera, et cetera. And then lastly, classification. This is a thing that I would like to do a little bit of demonstrating. And what I mean there is that we can take things like transaction data and get it to kind of break down what it thinks is going on. And we can also get it to look at, you know, well, transaction data is what we're most interested in, isn't it? So you can definitely get a bunch of things like ACH transaction descriptions and get it to help you tell a story about what that is showing based on dates and amounts and locations and things like that. And you can get it to help you come up with a story about whether or not something can be explained by, let's say, real estate versus, you know, international business versus a technology company or something like that. And I'll show you some examples of that. I see someone saying humans cannot be replaced by AI, especially in AML. I totally and 100% agree with this. Again, you'll notice that my idea here is that AML professionals are asked every day to do more than they can handle. Okay, from my time as an AML investigator, I used to have to it's funny to say, I kept a handwritten list where I would just write the last four of the case number of what it was in my queue for that week. And I needed to basically, it was like a tracking document to figure out how many cases I had to get done that day and that week so that my queue wouldn't go down to day zero. And it was just it was like, oh, I have to shortcut this investigation because I can't get any more information. So using AI tools to empower your existing staff is the best way to start. And I think that machines and humans work best together, right? Let's see, let me make two statements about that. Machines and humans work best together, partly because that's how we were created to do things, right? So like, what do humans do well? Humans do interpretation well, they do soft skills well, they do tone and empathy well, okay? What do machines do well? Consistency. They do logic very well, okay? They do processing large data sets and large calculations very well. So I still prefer for the machine to come in and get me to a farther place down the road, right? If I'd have asked the people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. I don't know anybody that rides a horse every day for their only form of transportation right now. I know there's people that do it, but I don't know them personally. Everybody I know owns a car and complains when they have to walk more than a quarter mile. So the bottom line is we are going to use these tools that we created for our use in order to empower ourselves to do the work better. That's the point, not replacing jobs. Maybe you can flatten your head count. Does it really make sense to have 10,000 analysts? I don't think so. Anyway, classification would require input of customer data. Yes, that's why I want to make sure I remind you, I address security first, okay? If you're going to be passing PII into the cloud, if you're using a cloud-based instance of a CRM system, then the generative AI that you would use inside that same cloud would have the same security protocols. So based on the policies and procedures, based on what your security shop tells you, you can use this, at least as far as there's already PII in your cloud. All right. See if there's any more questions before I move on. We're going to do a couple of little studies here. This first one is just a static case study, and then we'll do 2 live studies. But I want to open it up at this point. I want you to feel a little bit more free to ask those questions, okay? So if you want to ask a question live, feel free to raise your hand. If you want to chat in there in that Q&A, I really appreciate it. There is a way to do it anonymously. A couple of those questions, great questions, challenging questions, came in anonymously, and I welcome that, just like I welcome Chatty here, who's my new buddy. Okay, so what are you going to do? This is a cautionary tale, because some of what I asked Chatty to do here was really good and some of it wasn't, right? So I did start with entering some customer information. And then next I moved on to adding a little context. And then I was like, hey, what does AI think? Oops. There we go. Okay, so I gave it a nice big single shot task, just by way of example. AML investigator. I start with telling it who it is. I sort of set its mindset. Okay. And then I enter my facts. Okay. And I kind of set the tone around this. And then lastly, I give it its tasks. Okay. And this is just one way to do this. It's an example of a prompt that was relatively effective. Okay. By the way, the facts on this have been altered, but this is based on a real world study that we did, a real world explanation of a transaction activity where someone was like, yeah, I got a wedding gift from a parent. But I did change one thing about this, and I did this so that you all can see. What we've got here is, hey, Chatty, please first give me a summary of what happened. Summarize this activity here. And then also make a decision on whether you think this activity is plausible based on what we know about the customer. I'll let you guys pause and think about what you think is plausible. So Chatty here, first part we got was pretty good, all right? Inquiry summary, and I told you this, right? I told you the summary is going to be good. The customer, an 89-year-old individual from Alabama, made a large cash deposit and filled out an inquiry form. The cash was reported to be a wedding gift from a parent, and the customer anticipates receiving additional cash gifts related to the event. Great. Nature of activity, cash-based wedding gift. And by the way, that is like, it's such a common AML scenario, right? Somebody gets a cash gift for like a major life milestone, and that's amazing, okay? And then I said, but Chatty, what's plausible? Well, the decision summary that I got him, and I did this 0 shot, so it was all in one. Decision summary based on the customer's answers, the activity seems plausible and legitimate. And this is the part I love. The customer's age aligns with receiving gifts for a significant life event like a wedding. And the source is indicated as a parent, which is common for such occasions. You're lying to me, Chatty. This is the fun part, right? I said, it's a good tool for making a summary. And I love this, you know, it even pulled in the fact that, hey, we might even get additional cash gifts. So I could adjust the way I think about that case and things like that. Very useful. Down here, not so useful that my 89-year-old person got a parent wedding gift. Okay, because let's just take those two things together. First of all, 89 years old, I'm guessing, just guessing, not the median age for weddings. Okay. Second thing is, fine, okay, 89-year-old people sometimes get married. Congratulations. I hope you live a long and prosperous life together. However, comma, your parent didn't give you that wedding gift, okay? Because if you're 89, I'm going to carry the one, probably not a 109-year-old person or a 110-year-old person giving that gift. So again, we see that Chatty here is hallucinating a little bit and just writing something that sounds really good based on the fact that I told it I wanted to know if it was plausible. So it gave me a nice story, which is wrong, based on human intuition. Any comments, questions, or concerns? So that's just one example. By the way, some good examples. Oh yeah, I see someone with a hand up. Leah, are you able to unmute yourself, or do I have to do that? Maybe not. Maybe the hand went down. Okay, well, if it comes up again, go ahead and type it in the Q&A. All right. So now let's do a live study, narratives and notes. So I'm going to pull up an instance of ChatGPT. And by the way, this is where it gets interesting, you guys. We're going to do this live. It's like live TV. So if something goes wrong, I'm responsible for that, but hey, we knew it might happen. So narratives and notes. First off, I'm just going to start typing, some notional items in here. And I start with giving a prompt and saying, I'm telling it its context. You are AML Investigator GPT helping me write case notes. Please summarize my findings. Okay. So I just asked it to do a simple summary because, I'm just doing this. I misspelled some things. I typed it with no caps, et cetera, et cetera. And it's giving me a great bit of summary here. And you can see it's kind of going more and more off to where it was. Ooh, and it's making stuff up. And then it's going to give me a recommendation. It thinks it's a real AML investigator. I love this. Like I said, going live, sometimes you get unexpected results. I really thought I was going to get a couple of word summary. And one thing I have noticed, I should have been smarter than that. I've noticed that it likes to write a certain number of paragraphs. So you can see here, this length, I don't know if this is a certain character length. Again, look, I've done a bunch of research on this topic. I don't know everything. I'm not an expert in machine learning even. I am much more of an expert in the world of anti-money laundering. So I've been exploring and playing with this. And if you have a different experience, I'd love to hear your responses to how you might have used ChatGPT or Bard or anything. Again, Q&A is open. My email is open, etc. So let's see what we got here. I invented a person named John Akron, 39-year-old male, who was potentially evading the CTR limit in the US. That's the currency transaction report. $10,000 and 1 penny has to get reported to the IRS if it's being transacted in hard currency, in or out. So this guy did 3,000 to 7,000 in cash. I didn't give it a lot of detail. I didn't say what the total was or anything like that. So it said, potentially the objective, evading the CTR, key observations. Primary focus, if he intentionally invaded the limit, it knows what the CTR limit is. That's nice. I didn't tell it that. Made into his personal account at XYZ Bank. Okay. Total of 5 cash deposits. It just invented that. Kind of interesting. It does raise suspicions of structuring. I love this too. It invented this completely. Review of his financial history showed no prior instances. So here's how I would make this useful. First of all, we could do some multi-shot learning if we wanted, right? And we could ask it to refine the answer and eliminate things it invented and things like that. Or we could just pull up a blank document and we can paste it in here, and then we can start to heavily edit it. And this is actually what I recommend, right? If I sat in here and I just typed regenerate is a good command. Let's see what we get when we ask it to regenerate before I go into my copying and pasting. Again, I don't need to tell you how to find language and edit it, okay? But for some of us, writing a bunch of well-organized paragraphs can be tough. And so sometimes it is just useful to save time by saying, let me get in here and change the word multiple to the word 7, according to my formatting, right? Time frame, maybe add the date. Maybe spell it correctly with capitals. Okay. I could add my totals in there. I could actually say showed, what kind of prior instances. So if I were to sit here and read this carefully, you understand, of course, we would just come up with a better narrative than I would have come up with on my own. Okay. Or a better set of notes. Let's see. I asked it to regenerate, but add that I found the total amount was 7 deposits totaling 35,344. Customers and maintenance worker doing soft serve maintenance. Just made that up. Here's his occupation, source of funds. I like how they kind of structured this out. I never even thought of doing this myself. Cash deposits, deposit frequency, occupation, source of funds, things like that. Also ChatGPT does work with limited proficiency in other languages. So I know that I used it to translate some things. I was doing work on some questionnaires and I was like, well, what if we need to do this in Latin America? What if we need to do it in Canada? What if we need to do it in Europe? And so I had it translate to several different languages. I had it spit out Cyrillic characters for languages, for Russian. It's really interesting, some of the capabilities that it has in here. By the way, someone else asked which kinds of tools are helpful for the AML professional. There's another thing that I noticed that can be very helpful, and that is you can put spreadsheet data in here as well. And depending on the instance of the tool that you have, there's even now specialized tools for analyzing spreadsheet data. Okay, so you can take that labeled data set with all the customer transactions, you can put it in there, and then you can ask it to categorize and tell a story and summarize and things like that, instead of running a pivot table, or maybe after running a pivot table, maybe dump your pivot table in there and ask it what it means. Try different things. One of the things, again, that I always encourage my AML trainees to do is to try something, okay? You're not going to break it. Again, as long as you take whatever the machine made and pull it out and redo it in your own words and make sure that the facts are accurate and that the assumptions are accurate, do that, okay? And it can be useful as much as you're allowed to. If you have a thing prohibiting it, then you can't do it. All right. And it's recommending that we continue our investigation here. Let me try a different generation one. Well, let me just show you one that I did before. I tried to have it do a SAR. Okay. So this, I think, can be done, especially I would love to just take a population of SARs. Like if I had access to the SAR database, I would train a large language model on the SAR database. You can have this idea for free. And I would then just get it to predict how to write SARs, and then, just have it like where you could enter in just the top 10 pieces of information you need, or just feed in a KYC file and then a limited transaction file, and bam, SAR narratives. And people are already automating SAR narratives. I don't need to tell you that. So look, AML investigator GPT, please write me a suspicious activity report, SAR narrative in 3 paragraphs. First of all, it never listens when I tell it how long to make it. This is 3 paragraphs with all this intro stuff. I'm like, no, dude, I want that in the paragraphs, but okay. The facts include a subject who work in retail sales, 14th, 28th, total amount, cash deposits, blah, blah, blah. And it did a decent little job. Pertains to this person, concerning financial transaction pattern, just below the threshold for CTR. But given occupation in retail sales, it appears unusual to handle such amounts of cash, especially for a personal account. I recommend detailed investigation. I was like, well, that isn't exactly what I wanted. Please regenerate. Paragraph 1 is a high-level summary. Still wouldn't do that. 2 includes customer, and I tried to tell it exactly what paragraphs I wanted. So it gave it back to me. It got a little bit better. Again, if I could actually train it based on my own database of actual written SARs by 1,000 humans, that would be amazing. And I did want to do something in here. Let's see. Let us go back to my slide deck. So I told you about setting the mindset, telling ChatGPT what it should be thinking as, entering the facts, setting a tone, like how detailed, like what kind of work do you want done on the information, and then heavy editing. Okay. Always the heavy editing. Please make sure you're not putting yourself out of a job by assuming that ChatGPT is going to tell you the truth. All right, live study classification. What does AI see in open source? Okay, so this AI, again, is training itself based on the volume of published data on the internet, the volume of published words and letters and combinations of sentences. And so can we get it to match categories? Can we get it to do things? By the way, if it's giving you an opinion that something is something, one of the things I always like to do is try to take the opposite approach. So experiment with, if ChatGPT tells you something is something, try to see if it fits something else as well and see what it says again, right? I caution you on getting it to tell you opinions, but it can be kind of fun to try. So let's look at a bunch of notional data that I hashed in here. And we're actually going to go really crazy live, and we're going to go to Bard instead. Did I write too many characters in here? Oh man. Okay, it's not letting me put in any more characters. So what I'm going to do instead, I've got this huge unstructured list of text transaction data, and I put that in there. And now, is it going to say anything? It's looking, but I'm going to tell it what to do now because it wouldn't let me type. I think I exceeded the character limit. Wait, what did it say? Okay, sure, I can help it without a prompt. I just put in the data. I can help you analyze it. Here's some observations. It tells me the most common transaction type, IAT, International ACH, with the most common description as payment. Oh, look, we have the 3 different countries that are involved. Common organizations. Ooh, interesting. Amounts transferred between 60 and 70,000. All right. So it already gave me a really interesting set of information about it. And now I'm going to refine that in my few shot with a little bit of prompt. So what I want is, and now I'm asking it to classify the information into business types and potential use cases. All right. Ooh, it even gave me something that I can export into a sheet. That is super cool. And again, I know that I was reading today about some brand new tools specifically designed for data scientists to take large data sets and put them in and then generate outputs such as, visualization, classification, things like that. So again, if you can get with your data science people and start to be able to upload data sets into tools like that, there's even more you can do with this type of thing. So this did it basically it went through here and it looked like it categorized it based on some of the money laundering rules. And so it then told me what those things might be. I don't like that at all. That's not what I was trying to go for. Let's try this back in ChatGPT. And then in about 3 minutes, well, we'll do this for 1 more minute. Then we're going to go to our takeaways section and I'll give you more time for questions. Leah, I see your question there as well. Okay. Where was I? Here we go, transaction data analysis. So what I did here is I put in this same data set, but now I'm going to see if I can get it to take more text and do a prompt in front. I always say please, by the way, and never call it a toaster. If you've watched as many sci-fi dystopian movies as I have, be polite to your machines. Okay, so I told it it's an AML investigator. Please categorize the transactions according to industry and or business purpose with average amounts and potential explanations. And now, do I just save and submit? Again, same data set. So it's interesting to kind of compare and contrast the two tools, right? It's doing it by transaction key. Oh, I like this though, but it is telling me some of the information, right? 180,000 international ACH trading and recycling suppliers suggest could be related to trading and recycling supplies. Hey, that's brilliant. All right, so look, some of these responses, some of these prompts need a little bit of work. I have not perfected it. I did an earlier one where I got it to give me a little bit better. Let's see if I can get it to do it one more time, and then we'll move on from this. Here's a summary we can weave into a life story or business type. The story, you use the word story, so now it wants to tell a story. Angelo is a party associated with a burst in beneficiary activity. Meanwhile, a company involved in international ACH wire transfers seeks opportunities to trade and recycle goods. Interesting. Okay, enough of that. You can see that sometimes you get mixed results depending on what the AI may have learned from you in the past, and depending on what you may have done with it. And by the way, it also continues to learn from the existing conversation that you're having with it. Okay, so and sometimes it does a good job, and sometimes it does a poor job. Also, I'm using the free version, right? So if you use ChatGPT 4, if you have a corporate instance, if you have access to the full suite of tools, it's going to do a lot better in learning from you and your interactions with it than it's done with me, with my character limits, and I don't have spreadsheet upload capabilities the same way and stuff like that. I did use it to write code. It'll pop up a code editor and actually put things in certain, programming languages and stuff like that. So with 10 minutes left, I will answer some of these questions that I see up here, and I will try to offer you a few takeaways. Okay. So first of all, it's a secure tool. It's an incredibly powerful tool. So beware. Okay. Again, if you're driving that tractor or that backhoe for the first time, you might start ripping up parking spots and concrete and stuff like that instead of digging the ditch you were supposed to dig. So don't dig your hole too deep, and make sure you're digging in the right place. All right. But it's also a very useful tool, and playing around with it, dialing in your queries, dialing in your prompts, read up on things like how to make better prompts. So some suggestions for further education. I've been looking at the LinkedIn Learning page. I do what I always do, which is just start Googling things and then reading multiple sources about it. I follow people who are experts in the field, since I'm actually not. I'm doing this as an educational thing, one layperson to another in the field of AI, to help you understand how it may or may not be useful in your financial crime worlds. Okay. You can also ask it to just, look at activity and give opinions and stuff like that, and then just check your own instincts against what the machine thinks. Okay. So yeah, again, I have not seen anything besides this webinar about how to use AI for anti-money laundering. Now, there are a bunch of companies that are working in the data science field to try and use AI-like tools, machine learning, to be able to predict, better transaction pattern analysis, better customer behavioral analysis. So I also recommend, again, I don't know that I have a lot of courses, but look at those leaders in the AML field, okay? Go to the websites of some of these new and emerging technology companies in the field of transaction monitoring, data analysis, financial crime intelligence. Okay. Some of our company's competitors, some of our partners, and us, we are all doing things to try to leverage the AI revolution for these industries and to make our workers more efficient. Somebody liked the toaster comment. Glad you got that. Yeah, be nice to the AI. I like to do a lot of funny things. I tell the AI to call me a nickname. I ask it questions about its opinions on things that are vague. Lots of funny things. Okay, so when pasting in transaction data, what are the concerns on security breaches in client data? Listen, security breaches in client data are hugely important. You can't underemphasize this. You can't have too secure of a data fortress, okay? The instances of generative AI that are built on the cloud technology that your business may already be using have the exact same security controls as that cloud instance. So for example, if you're using something like AWS or Microsoft Azure and your customer personal identifying information sits in that cloud instance on like a CRM tool, like a Salesforce or like a, whatever it is, HubSpot, if you're already using that tool in a cloud somewhere, your PII is in the cloud. If you're using generative AI in that same cloud, the security controls are the same. That's what my CTO tells me. Okay. So if you're not doing that, then you should be very careful about using it. But no, if you're using a corporate internal instance, you're not adding the PII to the population of machine learning, right? It's staying within your container and learning within your container. That's the way I understand it. I'm not an expert. I do encourage you to research that. And I don't think you should put PII in ChatGPT unless it's a corporate instance that is under those security controls. Okay. So you'd have to, like, if you were going to do a SAR narrative, you'd have to like leave out the account number, leave out the name, leave out the location, ask it to write a SAR narrative based on transaction data that are just pure like dates and amounts, and then go back and add in the PII in your own secure environment. So I do not recommend using the open source tool to put in personally identifying information, but you can do some kind of summary work and stuff like that if you leave that information out. And of course, it's all based on your internal corporate procedures and policies. Okay. I think I covered all of these questions that are on here. Yeah, again, I haven't seen a lot of actual courses or a lot of actual classes being offered out there outside of the typical things. So I definitely recommend, one thing that's also very useful for understanding any technology is reading white papers. Sometimes they can be very technical. Technical papers are technical. What do you know? But again, increase your learning. Google the terms you don't know. Keep learning more, and then like a machine, you will be able to predict what something means or how it's working. All right. Thank you so much for the insightful questions. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. Again, my name is Rio Miner. I'm from Refine Intelligence. Tradecraft is my little training program designed to give you, the anti-financial crime professionals, more practical tools in your toolkit. I hope you found this informative today. That's my LinkedIn QR code if you want to screenshot it. That's my email address if you'd like to ask a question that you didn't feel like asking online, or if you'd like to get in touch for some other reason. Thank you all so much. And this concludes our webinar.